The music was loud, the lights were blinding, and for a moment, it looked like just another glamorous night at Kirk's private party. But behind the glitter and champagne, something darker was building, something no one in that room was ready for. And the second Rasheeda walked in and locked eyes with Spice, everything shifted. Witnesses say the tension was instant. No greetings, no smiles, just a cold, heavy silence that cut straight through the crowd. And then Yandy stepped in, thinking she could smooth things over. Big mistake, because what happened next? No one saw it coming. Voices started rising. Fingers were pointed. Accusations flew across the room like glass shattering in slow motion. Rasheeda, usually composed, completely snapped. People close to her say she had been holding things in for weeks, maybe months, and that night, it all came pouring out. "You think I don't know what y'all been doing behind my back?" she reportedly shouted, her voice shaking but loud enough to silence the entire party. Spice didn't back down, not even a little. "Oh, now you want to talk truth?" she fired back, stepping forward, eyes locked, energy unmatched. "Let's talk about everything, Rasheeda. Don't play innocent tonight." And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, Yandy got dragged right into the center of it all. Caught between loyalty and secrets, she tried to defend herself, but the damage was already done. Fans are shocked. Emotions ran high, and by the time security stepped in, the party was no longer a celebration. It had turned into a full-blown battlefield. And the biggest question now is, what exactly pushed Rasheeda to that breaking point? The room froze the second Rasheeda took that step forward, her heels hitting the marble floor sharp enough to cut through the music. People who were laughing just seconds ago slowly turned their heads because they knew that look on her face. It was not the usual calm, collected Rasheeda. This was something else, something heavy, something that had been building for a long time. Kirk stood near the bar, trying to play it off like everything was under control, but even he could feel it slipping out of his hands. Spice crossed her arms and tilted her head, watching Rasheeda come closer like she had been waiting for this moment all night. Yandy shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them, already sensing she was about to get pulled into something messy, real messy. The air got thick, conversations faded, and phones started coming out quietly because people knew this was about to turn into something nobody would believe unless they saw it. Rasheeda stopped right in front of Spice, her voice low at first but shaking with emotion. "You really thought I wouldn't find out," she said, and that one sentence alone sent a ripple through the room. Spice let out a small laugh, not nervous, not apologetic, just bold, like she had nothing to hide. "Find out what?" she shot back, stepping closer so there was barely any space between them. "Don't come at me with half stories, Rasheeda. Say it with your chest." That is when Rasheeda snapped, her voice rising, cutting through everything. "I know about the calls," she said. "I know about the late night meetings, and don't even get me started on what you said about me behind my back." The crowd gasped softly because now it was clear this was deeper than just party tension. This was personal, this was betrayal. Yandy stepped in quickly, raising her hands, trying to calm things down. Hold on, this is getting out of control," she said, looking straight at Rasheeda, but Rasheeda turned on her so fast it caught everyone off guard. "Oh, now you wanna mediate?" Rasheeda fired back. "Don't act like you innocent in this, Yandy, because your name been coming up too." Yandy eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice rising slightly, but you could hear the panic creeping in. "I have nothing to do with whatever you think is going on." Rasheeda shook her head slowly like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Stop lying," she said. "You think people don't talk? You think I don't get calls? You been sitting there smiling in my face while helping them move behind my back." Spice clapped her hands once, loud and sarcastic. "Wow, this is crazy," she said, laughing, but her eyes were sharp. "Listen, if you got something to say, say it clearly. Don't throw dirt and hide your hands." Rasheeda stepped even closer now, her voice steady but intense. "You've been disrespecting me for weeks and I let it slide because I wanted peace, but tonight no more," she said. "Tonight we clearing everything." Kirk finally stepped forward, trying to grab Rasheeda's arm. "Babe, chill," he muttered under his breath, but she pulled away instantly. "Don't touch me right now," she snapped, and that right there shocked everyone more than anything because Rasheeda rarely lost control like that. Kirk raised his hands, stepping back, clearly realizing he was not about to stop this storm. People in the background started whispering. Fans later would say emotions ran high and the energy felt like it could explode at any second. Some tried to move closer, others backed away, knowing things might get physical. Security was already inching in, slowly watching every move. Spice leaned in slightly, her voice dropping but still loud enough for people nearby to hear. "You mad because the truth coming out?" she said. "Are you mad because you can't control the narrative anymore?" Rasheeda let out a bitter laugh. "Control the narrative?" she repeated. "You've been been going around acting like you know my life, acting like you got some upper hand, but you don't even know half of what I've been dealing with. Yandy tried again, stepping between them. This is not the place for this, she said, her tone more serious now. We can talk about this privately, but Rasheeda pointed directly at her. No, we doing this right here because y'all been playing in my face in public, so we gonna handle it in public. The crowd reacted instantly, some gasping, some stepping closer, because now it felt like the situation had crossed a line. There was no going back. Spice rolled her eyes. You really want to do this here? She said. Fine, then let's talk about how you've been hearing things but never asking the right questions. You just assume and attack. Rasheeda shook her head. Because every time I asked I got lies, she snapped. Every time I tried to give y'all a chance to explain I got silence or fake stories. Kirk rubbed his face, clearly stressed out. This is not how he imagined the night going. His party, his event now turning into chaos, people filming, people whispering his name, being dragged into conversations he didn't want to be part of, but he couldn't deny that whatever was happening had been building under the surface for a while. Yandy's voice cracked slightly. I never betrayed you, she said, looking straight at Rasheeda. I stood by you when nobody else did. Rasheeda's eyes softened for a split second but then hardened again. If that was true, we wouldn't be standing here, she replied quietly, and that line hit harder than all the shouting because it carried pain, real pain. Spice stepped back for a moment, shaking her head like she was tired of the back and forth. You know what, she said, you wanna believe whatever story you've been fed, go ahead, but don't put my name in something without proof. Rasheeda immediately responded. Oh, I got proof, she said, her voice firm and confident. I didn't come here guessing, I came here knowing. The room erupted in murmurs. That one sentence changed everything, because now it wasn't just accusations, it was something deeper, something that could blow everything wide open. Yandy looked at Spice quickly, and for a brief second there was a look between them that did not go unnoticed, a look that made people start questioning everything. Rasheeda caught it too, and her expression shifted from anger to something colder. You see that, she said, pointing between them, that right there, that's exactly what I am talking about. Y'all think you slick, but I've been watching, I've been listening, and tonight I am done staying quiet. And the moment those words left Rasheeda's mouth, the entire energy in the room shifted again. It was no longer just tension, it was exposure. People leaned in closer, trying to catch every word, because now it felt like something real was about to be revealed. Spice's confident posture stiffened just slightly, and Yandy looked like she was trying to calculate her next move in real time. What proof, Rasheeda? Spice challenged, her voice still bold, but there was a slight edge now, like she wasn't as unbothered as before. Rasheeda reached into her bag slowly, not rushing, not hesitating, and that alone made people hold their breath. Kirk stepped forward again, his voice lower this time. Rasheeda, don't do this here, he warned, but she ignored him completely. You should have thought about that before you started playing games, she replied without even looking at him, and then she pulled out her phone, holding it up just enough for Spice and Yandy to see, not the whole room, just them, and whatever was on that screen made both of their expressions change instantly. The crowd couldn't see it, but they saw the reaction. Spice blinked twice, her jaw tightening, while Yandy took a small step back, like the ground shifted under her feet. Whispers spread like wildfire. Fans later would say that was the exact moment everything broke. Say something, Rasheeda pushed, her voice calm now but sharper than ever. Where that energy at now? Spice quickly recovered, folding her arms again. You showing me screenshots like that means something, she scoffed. Anybody can twist a conversation. Rasheeda let out a slow breath, shaking her head. Nah, don't do that, she said. Don't try to downplay it now, because you know exactly what you said. Yandy finally spoke again, but this time her voice was softer, almost defensive. Rasheeda, listen, you don't understand the context of that, she started, but Rasheeda cut her off immediately. Context, she repeated louder. So now there is context for talking about me behind my back, for setting up meetings without telling me, for laughing about my situation like it's entertainment. The room reacted again, because now the accusations were getting more specific, more uncomfortable. Spice stepped forward again, clearly not willing to back down. You acting like we plotted against you, she said. Maybe if you actually listened instead of assuming, you would know what was really going on. Rasheeda's eyes narrowed. Oh, I am listening now, she said, and what I am hearing is excuses. Kirk tried one more time, stepping between them physically. This time enough, he snapped, his patience finally gone. This is my event, not some street argument. Y'all not about to tear this place apart. Rasheeda turned to him slowly, her voice quieter but cutting. You should have thought about that before inviting people who don't respect your wife. The room went silent again, because that line hit Kirk directly and he had no immediate response. Yandy shook her head, tears starting to form in her eyes. This is not fair, she said. I never disrespected you. Rasheeda laughed, but it wasn't amused, it was tired. You don't have to say it directly, she replied. Your actions say enough. Spice rolled her eyes again, but this time she looked irritated more than confident. This is getting ridiculous, she said. You creating a whole story out of pieces you don't understand. Rasheeda stepped closer once more, lowering her voice but making sure every word landed. I understand enough to know when I am being played, she said, and I understand enough to know when people smile in my face but move different behind my back. In the background, people were recording everything, some whispering. Fans are shocked, and honestly nobody could blame them, because what started as a party had turned into a full breakdown. breakdown of trust, alliances shifting right in front of everyone. One of Kirk's friends tried to step in quietly, telling security to be ready just in case, because the way things were going it felt like it could turn physical at any moment, especially with how close Rasheeda and Spice were standing now, barely any space between them, tension radiating off both sides. Spice tilted her head again, but this time there was frustration in her voice. "You know what," she said, "believe whatever you want, but don't expect me to sit here and let you paint me as the villain." Rasheeda responded instantly, "If the shoe fits, wear it." Spice took a step closer like she was about to say something else, but Yandy grabbed her arm lightly, trying to hold her back. Spice let it go, but the message was clear. Things were reaching a breaking point. Yandy then turned back to Rasheeda, her voice more urgent now. "Listen, we can fix this," she said. "Whatever misunderstanding this is, we can talk it out." Rasheeda shook her head slowly. There it was again, that disbelief, that disappointment. "Fix it," she repeated. "You had time to fix it before tonight. Now it's just damage control." Kirk looked around at the crowd, realizing how many people were watching, how many phones were up, how this entire situation was already spreading beyond the room. His voice dropped again, more serious than before. "Y'all need to stop this right now," he said, but nobody was listening anymore. Rasheeda looked directly at both of them one last time, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I stood by y'all," she said. "I defended y'all when people questioned your loyalty. I gave y'all access to my life, my space, my trust, and this is what I get." Silence followed her words, heavier than all the shouting before, because it was not just anger now, it was hurt, and that made everything more intense. Spice looked at her for a second longer than before, like she was about to say something different, something real, but instead she just shook her head and looked away. Yandy wiped at her face, trying to hold it together, but the damage was clear. The connection between them had cracked right in front of everyone. Rasheeda took a step back, finally creating some distance, but her eyes never left them. "I am done," she said quietly but firmly. "I am done pretending everything is okay when it's not." And that sentence left the room hanging, because nobody knew what she would do next, but everyone knew nothing was going back to how it was before, and for a brief second it felt like everything might calm down, like maybe Rasheeda had said her piece and would walk away. But then Spice let out a sharp laugh under her breath, and that small sound was enough to pull everything right back into chaos. "Done," she repeated. "You not done, Rasheeda, you just getting started, because now I got things to say too." The crowd reacted instantly again, the tension snapping right back into place like a wire pulled too tight. Rasheeda slowly turned her head back toward Spice, her eyes cold. "What else could you possibly say?" she asked. Spice stepped forward again, her voice louder now. "Since we putting everything out there, let's talk about how you been moving lately," she fired back. "Let's talk about how you been acting like everything is perfect when it's not." Rasheeda eyebrows furrowed. "Don't try to flip this on me," she warned, but Spice didn't stop. "No, I am not flipping nothing, I am telling the truth." Spice shot back. "You mad at us, but you've been ignoring what is happening right in your own house." The moment she said that, the entire room went silent again. Even Kirk froze, his expression tightening, because now his name was indirectly being dragged into it. Rasheeda took a step closer, her voice dropping dangerously low. "Watch what you say next," she said, but Spice held her ground. "Nah, because somebody gotta say it," Spice replied. "You pointing fingers at us, but you not ready to look at what is really going on with Kirk." Kirk immediately stepped in, his tone sharp enough to cut through both of them. "Stop bringing me into this," he snapped, but it was too late. The damage was already done. People started whispering louder now, some even stepping closer, because this was no longer just about friendships, this was turning into something deeper, something that could shake everything. Rasheeda looked at Kirk for a moment, her face unreadable, and that silence between them said more than any words could have. Yandy noticed it too and quickly tried to jump in before things went even further out of control. "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid," she said, her voice shaky now. "This is getting too personal, too personal," Rasheeda repeated slowly, her eyes still locked on Kirk before shifting back to Spice. "Everything about this is personal," she snapped. "You don't get to decide when it crosses a line after everything that has already been said." Spice folded her arms again, but there was fire in her eyes now. "You wanna expose us? Fine, but don't act like you the only one with receipts," she said, and that line hit the crowd like a shockwave, because now it sounded like Spice was ready to reveal something too. Yandy grabbed Spice's arm again, more urgently this time. "Spice, don't," she whispered, but Spice pulled her arm away. "No, because I am tired of being blamed for everything," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Rasheeda took a step forward, her voice steady but intense. "Then say it," she challenged. "Say whatever you think you know." Kirk looked between them both, clearly realizing this was spiraling beyond anything he could control. His voice lowered again, almost pleading. "This is not the way to handle this," he said, but nobody was listening anymore. Spice exhaled sharply like she was making a decision in that moment. "Fine," she said. "You wanna know why we were talking behind your back? Because we were trying to figure out how to tell you the truth." Rasheeda's eyes narrowed. "What truth?" she demanded. Yandy shook her head quickly, her voice breaking. "Spice, please stop." But Spice didn't stop. She looked directly at Rasheeda. "Because you deserve to know what people been saying," she said, "and not just us, people close to you, people you trust." The room felt like it was closing in, every word making it harder to breathe. Fans would later say emotions ran high in a way they had never seen before, not not even on camera. This was raw, this was real, or at least it felt that way. Rasheeda stood completely still now, her anger mixing with something else, something uncertain. Say it, she repeated, quieter this time but somehow even more intense. Spice hesitated for a split second, and that hesitation did not go unnoticed, but then she spoke again. People been questioning Kirk loyalty, she said finally, and whether you want to hear it or not, those conversations didn't start with us. Kirk immediately reacted, his voice loud and defensive. That's enough, he snapped, but the damage was already spreading through the room like wildfire. Rasheeda slowly turned to him again, her expression shifting from anger to something much heavier, disbelief, hurt, maybe even fear. Yandy stepped forward quickly, trying to fix what had just been broken. This is not how it sounds, she said. We were trying to protect you. Rasheeda laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Protect me, she repeated. You call this protection? Talking behind my back, keeping things from me, letting me walk into rooms like everything is normal. Spice shook her head. You wouldn't have listened, she said. You already made up your mind about everything. Rasheeda responded instantly. Don't tell me what I would or wouldn't do. You didn't even give me the chance. The crowd was fully locked in now, nobody moving, nobody speaking, just watching as everything unfolded. Security stayed close, but even they seemed unsure when to step in, because this was not physical, it was emotional, and somehow that made it more explosive. Kirk ran his hands over his face, clearly overwhelmed. This whole thing is getting twisted, he muttered, but Rasheeda wasn't looking at him anymore. Her focus shifted back to Spice and Yandy. Both of you had something to say tonight, she said, so finish it, don't stop now. Yandy shook her head, tears falling freely. Now there is nothing else, she insisted, but Spice looked like she wasn't done, her silence heavy, like she was holding back one last thing, something that could push everything past the point of no return. Rasheeda saw it too, and her voice dropped one last time. Say it, she whispered, because at this point what else is left to break? And that question hung in the air like something fragile ready to shatter at any second. Nobody moved, nobody spoke for a moment, because everyone could feel it. Whatever came next would change everything. Spice looked at Rasheeda long and hard, her expression no longer just defensive but conflicted, like she was standing between saying too much and not saying enough. Yandy shook her head again, whispering, please don't, but Spice finally exhaled slowly, like she had made up her mind. You really want to know, she said, her voice quieter now but somehow heavier than before. Rasheeda didn't blink, she just nodded once. Say it. Spice glanced at Kirk for a split second, and that was all it took for the room to react again, whispers spreading fast, because that look said everything before a single word was even spoken. Then Spice turned back to Rasheeda and said, people been saying Kirk been moving different for a while, not just rumors, not just talk, actual situations. Kirk stepped forward immediately, his voice sharp enough to cut through everything. That's a lie, he snapped, but Spice didn't back down. I am not saying what I didn't hear, she replied. I am saying what people been bringing to us because they didn't know how to tell you. Rasheeda's face went still, completely still, and that kind of silence was louder than any scream, because now it wasn't just anger, it was processing. It was the kind of quiet that comes when something hits too close to the truth. Yandy rushed in again, trying to hold things together. This is not confirmed, she said quickly, it's just talk. We didn't want to hurt you. Rasheeda slowly turned her head toward her. So you thought hiding it would hurt less, she asked softly, and that softness cut deeper than everything she had said before. Kirk shook his head, stepping closer to Rasheeda. None of that is real, he said. You know me, don't let this get in your head. But Rasheeda didn't respond right away, she just stared at him, searching his face like she was trying to find something, anything that felt solid. Spice crossed her arms again, but this time she wasn't smirking, she looked serious. Because whether you like it or not, she said, things have been said and we were trying to figure out if it was even worth bringing to you. Rasheeda finally spoke again, her voice low and controlled. So instead you let me look stupid, she said. You let me stand next to people, smile, take pictures, defend everything while all of this was floating around behind me. Yandy stepped closer, tears still falling. No, we were trying to protect you, she repeated, but Rasheeda pulled her hand away when she tried to reach for her. Don't touch me, she said quietly, because right now I don't know who to trust. That line hit hard. The family was left divided right there in that moment. Kirk looked frustrated, pacing slightly like he couldn't believe what was happening. Spice looked firm, like she had said what needed to be said, and Yandy looked completely broken, caught in the middle of everything. People in the background started reacting more openly now, some whispering, some shaking their heads. Fans would later say they were shocked by how fast everything escalated from a party to something this deep, this personal. Kirk turned to Spice, his voice filled with anger. You don't get to come into my space and spread rumors like facts, he said, but Spice fired back instantly. I am not spreading anything, I am telling her what she deserves to know, whether you like it or not. Rasheeda watched both of them go back and forth, but she didn't interrupt this time. She just stood there, absorbing everything, and that silence made it worse because nobody knew what she was thinking, what she would do next. Yandy tried one last time to bring things down. Please, we need to stop this, she said. This is going too far, but Rasheeda slowly shook her head. No, she replied, this already went too far before tonight. We just pretending this is where it started. Kirk turned back to her, his voice softer, now almost pleading. Look at me, he said, don't let this come between us. But Rasheeda looked at him with a mixture gesture of pain and disbelief. Then tell me the truth, she said, not what sounds good, not what fixes the moment. The truth. Kirk hesitated, and that hesitation was small, but it was there and everyone saw it. Spice looked away slightly like she already knew what that pause meant, and Yandy closed her eyes like she was hoping this moment would just disappear. Rasheeda noticed it too, and her expression shifted again, something inside her hardening. You see, she said quietly, that's exactly what I am talking about. Kirk quickly tried to recover. I didn't do anything wrong, he said firmly, but the certainty in his voice didn't land the same anymore, not after everything that had been said, not after that pause. Rasheeda took a step back, creating distance again, her voice calm but final. I walked into this party thinking I knew where I stood, she said, thinking I knew who was real around me, but now, she paused, looking at each of them one by one. Now I see everything different. The room stayed silent, nobody daring to interrupt, because this felt like the moment everything officially broke. Not just friendships, not just trust, but something deeper, something that might not come back from this. Spice sighed quietly, like the weight of everything had finally settled, and Yandy wiped her face again, trying to hold herself together, but it was clear nothing was the same anymore. Rasheeda turned slightly like she was about to walk away, but then stopped just for a second. Without looking back, she spoke one last time. Tonight showed me more than any conversation ever could, she said, and now I know exactly what I need to do. And with that, she started walking, leaving behind a room full of tension, unanswered questions, and people trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Because one thing was clear, nothing about this situation was over. This was just the beginning. The moment Rasheeda walked away from that room, the energy shifted again, but this time it wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic, it was the kind of silence that feels heavier than shouting. People stayed frozen, watching her leave, like no one fully believed it was actually ending that way. Kirk stood still for a second, then exhaled sharply, running his hand through his hair like he was trying to reset reality in his mind. Spice looked at Yandy first and then toward Kirk, her expression unreadable now. The confidence she had earlier was gone, replaced with something quieter, almost reflective. Yandy wiped her face again, shaking her head like she couldn't process how fast everything had fallen apart. I didn't want it to go like this, she whispered, but nobody really responded because that felt obvious now. Kirk finally broke the silence, his voice low and strained. Look what y'all did, he said, but Spice immediately turned on him. Don't put this on us, she snapped. You've been sitting on your own problems and now we the problem. Kirk stared at her, clearly frustrated. You came into my party and turned it into this, he replied, but Spice shook her head. No, truth did that, not me. Yandy stepped between them again, trying to calm things down, but her voice had no strength left. This is not about blaming anymore, she said, it's already done. Rasheeda heard everything and now we all have to deal with the fallout. That line landed differently because it reminded everyone that whatever damage control they thought they could do was already too late. Spice let out a slow breath, looking toward the direction Rasheeda left. She didn't say much after that, just a quiet she needed to hear it, whether she accepts it or not, and that alone caused another ripple in the room because it suggested Spice believed she was right, even if it destroyed everything around her. Kirk shook his head, pacing slightly. This is not over, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else, but Yandy looked at him tired. Kirk, she said softly, it might be over in the way you think it should be. Meanwhile, outside the energy was different. Rasheeda stood alone for a moment near the exit, the noise of the party muffled behind her. She wasn't crying, she wasn't yelling, she was just still, like her mind was running through every memory, every conversation, every moment she once trusted without question. A friend tried to approach her carefully but stopped when she saw Rasheeda's face. It wasn't anger anymore, it was something colder, disappointment mixed with clarity. She finally spoke without turning around. I gave them too much, she said quietly, and those words carried more weight than anything she had said. Back inside, Spice was now sitting on the edge of a chair, staring at the floor. Yandy sat beside her silently, both of them not speaking for a while, until Spice finally said, do you think we went too far? Yandy didn't answer immediately because the question wasn't simple. It wasn't about one moment, it was about everything that led there. I think she needed to know, Yandy finally replied, but Spice nodded slowly. Yeah, but not like that, she said, and even she seemed unsure now, like the certainty she had earlier was starting to crack. Kirk had moved to another side of the room, speaking quietly with someone from security, trying to calm the situation down, but his mind wasn't there. It kept going back to Rasheeda's face the moment she stopped looking at him, like she didn't recognize what she was seeing anymore. The rumors that had been floating around now felt heavier, not because they were confirmed but because they had been spoken out loud in front of her. There was no hiding them anymore, no soft version of the truth that could undo what had just happened. Yandy eventually stood again, taking a deep breath. We need to leave, she said softly, because staying here is not helping anything. Spice didn't argue this time, she just nodded slowly and stood up too, but before walking away she looked around the room one last time, like she was memorizing the moment she just helped create outside. Rasheeda finally pulled out her phone, staring at it for a long moment before unlocking it. She didn't call anyone immediately, she just looked at the screen like she was deciding what version of herself comes next, because after a night like this nothing could stay the same inside. Kirk finally sat down for the first time since once it started, his face buried in his hands. The party behind him no longer felt like a celebration, just an aftermath. People were still there, but the energy was gone, replaced by confusion, gossip, and disbelief. And as the night stretched on, one thing became clear without anyone saying it directly. This wasn't just a fight at a party, this was a full fracture between people who once trusted each other and now didn't even know how to look at one another the same way again. The next morning did not feel like a normal morning for anyone involved. It felt heavier, quieter, like the air itself was still holding last night's arguments in place. Rasheeda sat in her car for a long time without starting the engine, just staring through the windshield, replaying every moment again and again. Not the shouting, not the crowd, but the faces, the pauses, the things that were said slowly and carefully like knives. Her phone kept lighting up, messages, calls, missed alerts, but she did not open any of them right away. She already knew what they would be: apologies, explanations, damage control, and she was not ready to accept any of it yet. Inside Kirk's house, the silence was different, but just as uncomfortable. He walked through the living room, still in the same state as the night before, trying to piece together how a private party turned into a public breakdown. He stopped at the bar where everything started and just stood there for a moment, shaking his head. Yandy had barely slept. She was sitting on her bed, scrolling through her phone, seeing clips already circulating online, people breaking down what happened second by second. Fans are shocked was already trending in different circles, even though no one had official statements yet, just fragments and reactions and speculation. Spice was the last to fully wake up. She sat on the edge of her bed for a while before touching her phone. She did not rush into it, but when she finally did, she saw the messages immediately, some supportive, some angry, some asking her why she said anything at all, and that question lingered longer than the rest. Back in Rasheeda's car, she finally unlocked her phone and opened one message. It was from Kirk. It simply said, "We need to talk." She stared at it for a long moment, then closed it without replying, because right now talking felt like the wrong language for everything that had happened. Yandy eventually called Spice. The phone rang a few times before she picked up. Neither of them spoke immediately. There was a long pause on both ends before Yandy finally said softly, "Are you okay?" Spice let out a small tired laugh, like the question itself was too simple. "No," she said honestly, "I am not." Kirk was also making calls, but most of them were not being answered. He was trying to control the situation, but the situation was already outside his control. Clips were spreading faster than explanations, and every version of the story was slightly different depending on who was telling it. Rasheeda finally stepped out of her car later that morning, walking slowly toward her house, but even then she did not feel present, like her body was moving, but her mind was still stuck in that room, surrounded by voices that no longer felt familiar. Inside her home, she finally sat down and looked at the messages again. This time she opened a group chat that used to be casual, friendly, normal, but now it was full of tension, unread messages, and silence from people who used to speak freely. One message from Spice appeared near the top. It read, "I never meant to hurt you." Rasheeda stared at it for a long time, her expression unchanged, before finally typing a response, but stopping halfway, deleting it, then typing again, then stopping again, because nothing she wrote felt right. Yandy and Spice eventually met later that day in person. It was not a dramatic meeting, no shouting, no confrontation, just two people sitting in a quiet space trying to understand how everything escalated so quickly. Spice finally broke the silence. "I didn't think it would explode like that," she admitted. Yandy nodded slowly. "Neither did I." Kirk spent most of the day trying to calm his own circle down. People were asking questions about his role, about what was true and what was not, and he kept repeating the same thing: "This is being misunderstood," but even he sounded less convinced each time he said it. Rasheeda eventually got a call. She did not want to answer, but she did. It was Kirk, his voice calmer now, less defensive, more careful. "We need to fix this," he said. Rasheeda closed her eyes for a moment before replying, "Fix what exactly?" she asked. "Because from where I am standing, nothing is the same anymore." There was a pause on the line before Kirk said, "We can explain everything," but Rasheeda interrupted softly, "Explanations don't change what already happened," she said, and that line made Kirk quiet, because deep down he knew she was right. Spice later sat alone again, scrolling through comments, some defending her, some attacking her, but none of it felt useful anymore. Yandy texted her, "We should all talk together," but Spice didn't respond immediately, because the idea of sitting in the same space again felt too soon, too fragile. Rasheeda finally stood up from her seat in her home and walked to the window, looking outside like she was trying to decide what life looks like after trust breaks in public. There was no clear answer, just silence and distance, and the uncomfortable feeling that something permanent had shifted, and somewhere between all of them the same question kept repeating without being spoken out loud: what happens now when the truth has already been said and nothing can take it back? By the time evening arrived, the silence did not feel like peace. It felt like pressure building slowly under everything. None of them had really moved on from what happened. They were just moving around it carefully, like it could still explode again at any second. Rasheeda stayed inside most of the day, ignoring repeated calls, until one message finally made her pause. It was not long. It simply said, "We are all being dragged online now, worse than last night." She did not need details to understand what that meant. Clips had fully taken over over. By now people were picking sides, breaking down expressions, replaying words frame by frame, turning a private breakdown into public judgment. She finally turned on the television and saw it for herself. Commentary panels already discussing the situation, opinions flying from every direction, some defending her, some questioning her reaction, some focusing on Spice, some blaming Kirk. The story was no longer theirs alone, it belonged to everyone watching. Kirk sat in a meeting with someone from his team trying to figure out damage control, but even the conversation felt uncertain because there was no single angle to fix. He kept rubbing his forehead, listening but not really absorbing most of it. His mind kept going back to Rasheeda walking out without looking back. Spice was at home scrolling through reactions, her face unreadable now. The confidence from the night before had faded, completely replaced with exhaustion. Every few seconds another clip would appear, another opinion, another interpretation of her words. Yandy called her again, but this time Spice answered less quickly. I think we need to meet, Yandy said carefully. Spice did not respond immediately, then finally said, do you think she will even show up? Yandy paused. I don't know, she admitted, but we cannot keep avoiding it. Rasheeda finally left her house later that evening, not to meet anyone, just to drive. She needed space, away from the walls, away from messages, away from replaying thoughts. She parked somewhere quiet and sat there for a long time, hands resting on the steering wheel but not moving. She thought about Spice's face when the truth was spoken. She thought about Yandy trying to hold everything together. She thought about Kirk's silence at the wrong moment and how that silence felt heavier than any argument. Meanwhile, Kirk received another message, this one from Spice. It simply said, we should talk before this gets worse. He stared at it for a long moment before replying, agree, but it has to be honest, no more half versions. Spice read it and did not respond immediately. Yandy was already preparing for that conversation. She had gone over it in her head multiple times, trying to figure out how to keep things from breaking further, but even she knew there was no version where everything went back to normal. Later that night Spice and Yandy met again, this time more serious, no distractions, no small talk. Spice sat down first, looking at Yandy, and said, if we are doing this we need to be clear about everything. Yandy nodded slowly. We will be. Rasheeda eventually got another call from Kirk. She almost ignored it but answered this time. There was a long silence on both ends before Kirk finally spoke softly. I don't want this to end like this, he said. Rasheeda looked out the window, not responding immediately. It already ended, she said quietly. Kirk exhaled. No, it didn't, he replied. It just broke. Rasheeda closed her eyes because that distinction did not feel comforting. It felt worse. Something broken still exists, which means it can hurt again. Spice and Yandy's conversation, meanwhile, was not loud. It was careful. Every sentence weighed before being spoken. Spice admitted she should not have said everything the way she did. Yandy admitted she should have spoken sooner, both of them circling the same realization that timing had changed everything. Rasheeda finally replied to Kirk after a long pause. Her message was short, we will talk when I am ready, and that was the first real boundary she had set since everything fell apart. Kirk read it and did not argue. Online the situation continued to grow, but inside their separate spaces something quieter was happening. Not resolution, not forgiveness, but recognition that nothing could stay hidden anymore. Everything had surfaced and now they all had to live with it, and somewhere in the middle of all that silence, all the distance and all the unfinished conversations, there was a shared understanding forming. Even if no one said it out loud, this was not just drama anymore, it was the moment everything changed permanently. The next morning felt different again, but not better. It felt like everyone had started accepting that there would be no clean ending to what happened the night before, only loose edges and unfinished conversations that kept reopening every time someone tried to move forward. Rasheeda woke up early but stayed in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling. Her phone was face down on the table beside her, but she could still feel it buzzing occasionally. She did not need to look to know the world outside was still talking, still reacting, still turning her private pain into public discussion. Kirk had barely slept. He was already on calls trying to calm things down, but nothing was landing the way he wanted. People around him were asking for clarity, answers, statements, something that could control the narrative, but he had nothing solid enough to give without making it worse. Spice sat in her room scrolling through messages again, but this time she stopped on the ones from people she trusted, asking her why she said certain things, why she brought up Kirk, why she did not stop earlier, and for the first time she looked unsure about how to respond. Yandy was caught in between, trying to repair both sides. She kept replaying her own role in everything, wondering if she should have spoken earlier or stayed out of it completely, but either way she felt responsible for how far it went. Rasheeda finally got out of bed and walked to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water, but she did not drink it immediately. She just stood there thinking about how quickly everything shifted from normal to unrecognizable. Her phone lit up again, this time a message from Spice. It simply said, can we talk, just us? Rasheeda stared at it for a long time, her expression unreadable, before finally placing the phone back down without replying right away. Kirk on the other side received pressure from multiple directions, some people telling him to publicly clear things, others telling him to stay quiet and let it pass, but nothing felt right because silence had already been part of the problem. Spice eventually met Yandy Yandy again in person. This time the tone was different, less defensive, more tired, both of them sitting across from each other knowing that no matter what they said it would not undo what had already been exposed. I didn't expect it to go that far, Spice admitted quietly. Yandy nodded. Same, she said, and that was the first honest agreement between them since everything started falling apart. Rasheeda later left her house again, not for confrontation but for distance. She drove without a destination, just needing space, away from messages, away from names, away from everything tied to last night. But even on the road her thoughts kept circling back. Kirk tried calling Rasheeda again but she did not pick up. This time he left a voicemail instead, his voice calmer, now less defensive, just saying, "We need to sit down and talk properly, no pressure, just truth." Rasheeda listened to it later without responding immediately. She sat in her car again, holding the phone in her hand, replaying the message twice before setting it down slowly. Online the situation had not slowed down. Clips were still circulating, theories were still forming, and people were still assigning blame, but inside the real world the four of them were all sitting in different spaces, carrying the same weight in different ways. Spice eventually told Yandy, "I think we broke something that cannot be put back the same way." Yandy didn't disagree, she just looked down and said, "Maybe it was already broken, we just didn't see it yet." Rasheeda finally replied to Spice later that day. Her message was short, "Not yet, I need time," and Spice read it without reacting immediately, just sitting with it, because even though it was not forgiveness, it was not closure either. It was something in between. Kirk received the same kind of distance, no full rejection but no resolution either, just delay and uncertainty, and for the first time he realized that no amount of explanation could force things back into place. And as the day ended, none of them had solved anything, none of them had fully moved forward, but something important had changed. They were no longer reacting in the moment, they were all thinking about consequences, about permanence, about what cannot be unsaid, and that realization alone was enough to keep everything suspended in tension, waiting for the next move that none of them felt ready to make. By the time the next evening came, the tension had not faded, it had only settled deeper, like something heavy sitting in every room without moving. Rasheeda finally agreed to meet, but not in the way anyone expected. She chose a quiet, private space, away from cameras, away from noise, away from the pressure of people watching every expression. Kirk arrived first, sitting alone for a few minutes before anyone else came in. He looked different from the night of the party, less sharp, more worn down, like the situation had aged him in a matter of days. He kept checking his phone but not really reading anything, just passing time until it started. Spice came next, walking in slowly, Yandy right behind her. The three of them exchanged brief looks, no one smiling, no one pretending this was normal. There was no greeting that could fit what they had already been through. Rasheeda arrived last. The room changed the moment she stepped in, not because she spoke but because she didn't. Everyone felt it immediately, the distance, the quiet, the controlled expression that replaced the anger from before. She sat down across from them without rushing, without hesitation. For a few seconds nobody said anything. It felt like everyone was waiting for someone else to start, because once it started there would be no easy way to stop. Finally Yandy broke the silence softly. "I don't even know where to begin," she admitted. Spice looked down. Kirk stayed quiet. Rasheeda finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "We begin with the truth," she said. "No edits, no protection, no half stories." Kirk nodded slowly. "I agree," he said, but Spice immediately added, "Truth from all sides, not just one version," and that single line brought the tension right back into the room, because it meant there would be no single agreement on what happened. Rasheeda leaned back slightly, her eyes moving between them all. "I didn't come here to argue," she said. "I came here to understand what part of my life I was not being told about." Yandy swallowed hard. "We were trying to protect you," she said again, but Rasheeda shook her head slowly. "Don't use that word," she replied, "because protection without honesty is just control." Silence followed again, heavier this time. Spice exhaled sharply. "Look," she said, "I won't pretend everything we said was perfect, but some of what we brought up didn't start with us. It was already circulating before we ever spoke." Kirk leaned forward slightly. "So what exactly are you saying?" he asked. Spice hesitated just for a moment, then said, "People were already questioning things before the party. We didn't create it, we reacted to it." Rasheeda's expression didn't change, but her eyes tightened slightly. "So you chose to react by hiding it," she said, "instead of telling me directly." Yandy immediately responded, "Because we didn't know how you would take it," she admitted, and that honesty landed differently this time, not as an excuse but as a confession. Kirk rubbed his face slowly. "I didn't handle this right," he said finally. "I should have addressed things sooner, before it reached this point." Rasheeda looked at him for a long moment, not angry, just studying him like she was trying to understand where the distance started. "I asked for clarity before," she said quietly, "and I was told everything was fine." That sentence sat in the air longer than anything else. Spice looked up again. "We all failed in different ways," she said softly, and for the first time nobody argued with that. The conversation continued carefully. No shouting, no sudden moves, just uncomfortable truths being placed on the table one after another, each one changing the shape of what they thought they knew. At one point Yandy admitted she should have spoken sooner, even if it caused conflict. Spice admitted she let outside pressure influence how she handled things. Kirk admitted silence made everything worse. Instead of protecting anyone. Rasheeda listened without interrupting for most of it, and that alone changed the tone because she was no longer reacting, she was absorbing. When she finally spoke again, her voice was quieter. I don't know what this becomes from here, she said, but I know what it cannot be anymore. Kirk looked at her. What is that, he asked. Rasheeda met his eyes directly, pretending nothing happened. She said, I cannot go back to pretending I didn't hear what I heard or see what I saw. The room went still again because that did not sound like reconciliation, it sounded like acceptance of change. Spice nodded slowly. Neither can we, she admitted. Yandy looked between all of them, realizing this was not a repair session, this was a redefinition. When the meeting ended, there was no resolution, no dramatic forgiveness, no final closure, just a shared understanding that things had shifted permanently, and whatever came next would have to exist in that new reality. And as they left separately, none of them spoke much, but all of them carried the same thought quietly. The damage was no longer the question now was what life looks like after it. The days that followed felt unusually quiet on the surface, but underneath it, nothing had truly settled. The conversation had ended, but the consequences kept moving on their own, spreading through their circles, through conversations, through new interpretations that none of them could fully control anymore. Rasheeda stayed distant after the meeting. She answered calls selectively and avoided group conversations altogether, not out of anger this time, but out of exhaustion. She was no longer reacting, she was observing, trying to understand what was real and what was noise that had grown around it. Kirk tried to rebuild stability in his own way, but it was clear that control had shifted away from him too. Every explanation he gave seemed to raise new questions instead of closing old ones. People around him were no longer just asking what happened, they were asking why it was hidden for so long. Spice found herself in a strange position where she was neither fully defended nor fully blamed. She kept getting messages from both sides, some saying she was honest, others saying she escalated something that could have been handled privately. She stopped replying after a while and just watched everything unfold quietly. Yandy was the most visibly affected. She had always tried to be the connector between people, but now she felt like every bridge she touched had weakened. She replayed the meeting in her mind, constantly wondering which sentence changed everything and whether she should have stopped speaking. At some point, Rasheeda eventually met someone close to her privately, not for advice but just to speak freely. For the first time since everything happened, she admitted she didn't recognize the environment she had been in, and that what hurt most was not just what was said but how long it was unsaid. Kirk received another message from Rasheeda, a simple one, saying, I need space, not silence, just space. And that distinction mattered because it meant she was not cutting him off completely, but she was also not stepping back into the same place. Spice and Yandy met again too, but this time it was less about defending actions and more about understanding impact. Spice said something that lingered after the conversation, sometimes truth still destroys things even when it is needed, and Yandy didn't disagree. Online discussions had not slowed down, fans were still analyzing every detail, every facial expression, every pause, trying to decide who was right. But inside their world, the situation had already moved beyond public opinion, it had become personal reconstruction. Kirk tried once more to reach Rasheeda in person, but she declined politely, saying she wasn't ready, and he respected it this time without pushing further because he could feel that pushing would only widen the distance. Rasheeda spent more time alone during this period, not isolating but recalibrating every memory, every interaction, every assumption she had made. She wasn't rewriting the past, she was simply looking at it without the emotional filter that had once softened it. Spice eventually told Yandy, I don't think we will ever be seen the same again, and Yandy quietly responded, maybe that is the consequence of being honest. Too late. Kirk sat one evening looking at old photos from better days and closed the folder without saving anything. He wasn't trying to erase the past, just realizing it no longer matched the present version of his life. And as time stretched forward slowly, none of them had repaired what broke, but something more complicated had started to form. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but distance with awareness, the kind of space where people still exist in each other's world but differently now, carefully now, with memory attached to every step. What once felt like a single dramatic night had turned into a lasting shift in how they all saw each other, and no matter what happened next, that shift was already permanent. A week later, the silence started to feel less like shock and more like routine. Everyone had settled into a strange rhythm of distance where no one was fully cut off, but no one was truly close either. It was a thin space between connection and separation, and it was exhausting for all of them in different ways. Rasheeda had begun returning to small parts of her normal life, but nothing felt fully normal anymore. She moved slower through conversations, she listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak it was careful, measured, like every sentence had to pass through a filter before leaving her mouth. Kirk tried again to bring structure back into his world, but even his closest people could see the difference. He wasn't reacting with confidence anymore, he was reacting with caution, like every decision now carried invisible weight that didn't used to exist before that night. Spice had gone quieter in public spaces, not because she had nothing to say but because anything she said seemed to reopen the same debate. She started choosing silence in situations where she would normally speak, and that silence was was noticed by everyone around her. Yandy was still trying to hold emotional balance between all sides, but she had started to understand something difficult, that not every situation can be stabilized. Sometimes involvement itself becomes part of the damage. Rasheeda eventually agreed to meet Kirk again, but this time it was different. No Spice, no Yandy, just the two of them in a neutral space. The air between them felt heavier than before, not angry, just uncertain, like both were trying to understand what version of each other was left. Kirk spoke first this time. "I didn't protect you the way I should have," he admitted. Rasheeda looked down at her hands for a moment before responding. "I didn't ask for perfection," she said. "I asked for honesty, and I didn't get it." That sentence landed quietly but deeply. Kirk nodded slowly because he knew she was right. There was no defense that could change the absence of truth at the moment it mattered most. Rasheeda finally looked up at him fully, not with anger but with clarity. "What hurt the most," she said, "wasn't what I found out, it was how long I was the last to know." Kirk exhaled sharply because that was the part he could not explain in a way that would make it lighter. There was no version of that truth that felt less painful. Spice and Yandy were also in their own separate reflection phase, not together this time. Spice had started questioning how quickly things escalated, and Yandy had started questioning how long she stayed silent before stepping in, both of them arriving at uncomfortable conclusions in different ways. Spice later sent a message to Yandy saying, "I think we underestimated how fast words spread once they leave your mouth," and Yandy replied almost immediately, "They don't just spread, they change shape." Online, the conversation had shifted slightly from shock to analysis. People were now dissecting motives, timelines, and intentions, but inside the real world, the people involved were dealing with something slower and heavier than public opinion. They were dealing with emotional aftermath. Kirk met with a close friend one evening who simply told him, "Sometimes damage isn't about what you did wrong first, it's about what you didn't fix early enough," and that stayed with him longer than most conversations had. Rasheeda spent an evening alone, sitting quietly, not scrolling, not calling anyone, just thinking about how trust changes once it breaks in front of other people. It doesn't just break privately, it becomes part of memory for everyone who witnessed it. Spice walked through her own space, replaying the exact moment she decided to speak fully, knowing that moment could not be taken back, but also knowing she didn't regret everything, just the way it unfolded. Yandy finally admitted to herself that she tried to mediate too late, and that timing in situations like this is not just important, it is everything. And as another day ended, none of them were fixed, none of them were healed, but something had shifted again. The anger was no longer at the center, now it was understanding. Uncomfortable, incomplete, but real understanding that what happened could not be undone, only lived with, and that realization changed the way each of them would move forward from here, quietly, permanently, and without illusion. Another morning came, but this one felt different, not lighter, not heavier, just final in a quiet way, like something inside the situation had stopped resisting and accepted its shape. Rasheeda woke up early again, but this time she did not rush into thinking or checking messages. She just sat for a moment and let the silence exist without trying to fix it. Kirk was already up too, staring at his phone, but not scrolling, not calling, just holding it like it might decide something for him. The uncertainty that had been hanging over him for days was still there, but now it felt more permanent, less like a crisis, more like a reality he had to adjust to. Spice stood by her window for a long time, looking outside without really focusing on anything. Her thoughts were not loud anymore, they were steady, and that steadiness came with acceptance that nothing would return to how it was before, not fully, not cleanly. Yandy finally met Spice again, briefly, this time not to explain or defend, but just to acknowledge what had happened between them. Both of them understood that some parts of their connection had changed permanently, even if they still respected each other in a different way now. Later that day, Rasheeda and Kirk spoke one last time in a calm, controlled conversation. There were no raised voices, no interruptions, just honesty placed carefully between them. Kirk admitted he should have been clearer earlier. Rasheeda admitted she could not unsee what she saw, and both of them understood that was enough to change direction. They did not argue, they did not force resolution, they simply acknowledged that the relationship they once had was no longer the same version, and forcing it would only create more distance than healing. Spice and Yandy also reached a quiet understanding of their own, not perfect, not dramatic, just two people accepting that timing and pressure had changed how their actions were received, and that lesson would stay with them longer than the situation itself. By the end of the day, each of them was alone in their own space, but none of them felt the same weight of confusion anymore, because clarity had finally replaced uncertainty, even if that clarity was uncomfortable. Rasheeda looked at her phone one last time before placing it face down. She was not avoiding life anymore, she was choosing how to step back into it carefully, with boundaries, with awareness, with a version of herself that no longer ignored signs she once overlooked. Kirk sat down quietly, realizing that some consequences are not loud, they are quiet changes in how people look at you, how they speak to you, and how they decide what they can trust again. Spice understood something similar, that speaking truth does not always bring peace, sometimes it brings distance before anything else, and Yandy learned that holding everything together too long can still result in things breaking anyway, just later and differently. And as the story settled into its final silence, one thing became became clear this was never just about one party or one argument, it was about trust that stretched too far and broke in front of everyone, and once that happens there is no version of events where everything simply resets. If you are still watching this, then tell me what you think. Should Rasheeda have walked away sooner, or did Spice and Yandy cross a line they could never come back from? Leave your thoughts below, like this video if you want more deep breakdowns like this, and subscribe because the next story is already building behind the silence and you will not want to miss what comes next.